My guest this week is Larry Crane. Larry is the editor and founder of Tape-Op magazine, the owner of Portland's Jackpot studio, as well as a freelance producer, engineer, and mixer who has also worked internationally. He's recorded artists such as Sleater-Kinney, The Decemberists, M. Ward, Jenny Lewis, The Go-Betweens, Elliott Smith, Stephen Malkmus, Quasi, David J., Richmond Fontaine, and more. He's worked in the past as a record label owner, a radio station music director, a DJ, freelance music journalist, and bass player in bands since 1984, including Elephant Factory, Vomit Launch, and the Sunbirds. Larry is also the archivist for the estate of Elliott Smith, and in 2019, Larry was inducted into the Oregon Music Hall of Fame. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome the Revolutions Per Movie, Larry Crane. Hi, Larry.
Hey, how you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great. Thank you for picking a high school dream. Pink Floyd live at Pompeii.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so good. And before we get into it, though, a little while ago, was given some medication by my doctor that I was allergic to.
Ooh.
And it caused me to start hallucinating. And I had to write it out. And I was like, what do I do? I can't drive. Everything's making me feel nauseous, but I'm seeing tracers everywhere. And I looked over at that stack of DVDs and saw, all right, I got to watch Pink Floyd live at Pompeii. And it was so good high. Oh, my God. I haven't watched this high probably since I was a teenager, maybe, or something, like during college, right?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen it high.
It's kind of amazing. And I was also like, Pink Floyd is the greatest band in the world. Oh my God, this is delicious.
But it's well, we'll get more in depth on this, but it's definitely also something that some viewer could watch this film and think that it's one of the worst movies ever made.
Oh yeah, we'll totally get into that.
We should talk about that. That's fun.
But I got to ask you, I was lucky enough to record in Laundry Rules.
My basement studio. Yeah.
Yes, and literally, like, there's the washer and dryer. But like when you moved, to wanting to record in a new studio, for Jackpot recording studio, it was such a great thing for this city because most of the larger or mid-sized recording studios, you could listen to a recording and just feel the dimmer setting on the track lighting in the studio. It was very sterile. Most of my recording experiences in town. Yeah. So what did you want to accomplish that was missing at that point?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. No one's really quite phrased it that way. I think it was just really I've always been part of a music scene wherever I've lived of some sort. It was Northern California before moving to Portland, Oregon. And even moving here, I'd already met people like Sean Crogan and John Moen and Gilly Hanner, who I was just emailing a bunch with today. And so, I kind of like fell into that sort of world of whatever alternative rock you want to call it or whatever. And I think it was just more like people were already coming over to that house studio, like Mustache had and Elliott had and the Maroons, John Moen's band. Everything, everyone was coming over. Rebecca Gates and Cat Power and Stephen Malkmus. And I mean, Versus would come through on tour, from New York and do something. It was kind of crazy. So I was really hoping to get out of my house. It was too busy for a house, but that's more of a practical, logical way to put it. But culturally, I wanted to follow in the footsteps of people that I kind of knew about, like Steve Fisk up in when he was up in what was that town? No, before that, or well, after that, actually, Ellensburg, when he was recording the Screaming Trees and stuff, and Greg Freeman, who was also in Pell Mell, had recorded the Vomit Launch records for us, and also Donner Party, Sam Coombs' old band. So there's all these connections like that. I'd met people like that. I knew about Don Zientara would be a good example, recording Fugazi and all those Minor Threat and Bad Brains at his house, And I just wanted to be part of that, I thought I had started to build up some technical skills, and to me it's just art. Music is art, and you want to help people with figuring out how to do it. I mean, I'd say your question's really good, and your positioning of what the recording scene was like back then in 97 or so before that, is really good. But the only person that I would say was an outlier was Mike Lastra, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's someone I've always really admired, and I felt like I was going to step on his toes, or maybe Drew Kenulette too, to a little extent, but he'd kind
All
of
right.
moved into post production by then. There was a lot of stuff. There were things going on. There were some good studios, like Dead Aunt Thelma's is still here, But track lighting and a different vibe. I mean,
It was weird. You just didn't know. Like, it took me a long time. I was not, like, for a lot of those early bands, the person who was making decisions on, like, who's going to produce this, or, where are we going to go, or what are we going to do. And I just remember there were these places that you would feel like somebody just walked out of here doing a car VO. It was just a weird vibe. So I
oh
just
yeah,
remember just the way you even painted Jackpot, and just the way it
yeah,
felt, and the type of couches, and like just the lamps you used. It was so homey, and
yeah.
I think was conducive to just people wanting to spend time in it, because this film, Pink Floyd Live at Pompeii, it's interesting. There's like 3 versions of this damn film, right?
At least,
Yeah.
actually, I've got a fourth if you want to talk about that
Oh
too.
God, I'm gonna cry. So the first one was like an hour long. It's just them at Pompeii. It was directed by this guy, Adrian Maben, who innocently called up Pink Floyd's management originally and was like, I want to make a film where it's like Pink Floyd music with Magritte paintings and Dolly, and that will be it. And he said they were really kind, like Dave Gilmour and the manager were like, let us think about that. And they're like, that's not that cool. So the director was on vacation, and he was at these ruins at Pompeii, and he's like, there's been all these concert films like Woodstock that's just filled with, it's just about the audience too, Monterey Pop.
Oh yeah,
And he's like, what if there's no audience and it's just the band in this empty space? It's kind of an amazing idea. And so the band got really into it. But the weird thing about the director is he cannot let this project finish. He basically says he's like, I'm always disappointed with what I've made, and I need to go back. I mean, do you ever feel like that as a producer and engineer?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, oh. Yes. I mean, especially, talking about Jackpot earlier, Elliot, doing Elliot Smith's archive work. There's times where I'm like, well, can I remix that thing, or whatever it is? Can I rewrite the liner notes? To explain the context better, to present a better version of a piece of music? So I understand that. Actually, my college degree is in filmmaking. Strangely
I
enough.
didn't know that, Larry.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I've got a degree in visual communications and a minor in studio art. So it kind of makes sense that I would be drawn to music documentaries as well.
Yeah, totally. I was at the Northwest Film Center in
Yeah.
education, helping instructors there. And same thing, my dream was to be a filmmaker, and then music took me away so quickly. I was
Yeah.
like, what, somebody wants to put out a record and I
Ye-
don't have to pay
Yeah.
for it? I don't have to raise money? I was like,
Yeah.
cool.
You don't have to get like an 8-person crew together to shoot the most simple scene. So yeah, for me it's like yeah, revisiting, your art. I mean, you hear about that, like, Orson Welles or somebody like, never, yeah, I need my final cut. I need to do this, or,
Right.
and you see like all these director's cuts type films, which, I mean, sometimes are pretty bad and sometimes are very good. I think there's always an excuse for revisiting art. You could spend your whole career revisiting one piece of work in different ways, or modulating it and morphing it and turning it into something else.
Sure.
I mean, I think that's always valid. I think there's like this weird phobia of like, that's how it was meant to be. Like that's the artist final vision. It's like, the artist ran out of money and time.
Right.
Can we go back and look at this? Even if if the person's not there. But I think in the case of Adrian Maben,
Yes.
and this documentary, I think I have a lot of misgivings about this film.
Let me set the stage here for the listeners. He originally made a version that's like an hour long, and it's
Mhm.
just the band at Pompeii with some like 16 millimeter dissolves of like, statues and volcanoes and stuff.
And then walking around in the mist of the volcano, and
Yeah, exactly. And some of it was shot on a soundstage in France, and they weren't happy about it. But again, they ran out of time and money.
Right.
And they're like, okay, we have to lip sync some of these in a different studio.
Right.
So then there was a second version, which I had at the video store, which was on VHS, which is the one that most people saw. It was the same film, but it had some footage of them recording Dark Side of the Moon and playing around with like recording On the Run and doing, guitar runs for Eclipse. And then
Us and Them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's amazing. And then the third version is a director's cut where the first shot of this film is a like 3-minute slow pan into Nick Mason, at the beginning of Echoes Part 1.
Oh yeah, where the camera's way back and you see the amphitheater and it moves in.
And you just have to be patient, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the song is, it's slow, and band members aren't, they're introducing their themes, not everyone's playing yet.
Yeah.
And he, in the director's cut, is like intercutting footage of, like David Gilmour in the studio blowing a raspberry because he missed a take, or rockets going into space.
Horrible looking CGI stuff of planets and stuff.
Oh, it's so bad. Like horrible. I know it's like screensaver type stuff. Yeah. And so knowing what it was, it's like he got scared of the silence and the quiet in it and just the patience.
You know what I think it is? He lost a bunch of the film.
He did lose a lot of the
outtakes are gone.
But he did have the original film, and he could have just not touched it.
Man, that's true. Because you see that on that bonus thing. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it's a weird choice. And so there's a fourth version, you were saying?
There's a fourth version.
Oh, that motherfucker.
Yeah, so you could have that on VHS, like you mentioned. And then there's...
Oh, my God.
So there's the VHS one that's the proper film like we all saw like in high school. And the midnight movies or wherever. And then there's the 2002 DVD version, which is horribly pixelated. And then if you buy I'm looking over at it here in my office. The Pink Floyd Early Years is the name of the box set. It's like a $700 box set. And if you buy that, there's a Blu-ray and a DVD of where they took they remixed the music off of the original tapes. I think Andy Jackson, who did a lot of their work, did that. And then they which they also offer up on CD on the box set, which is awesome. And then they give you an order. So they remix the audio, and then they cut some video from his 2002 DVD version to fit the new mixes. They synced it up, and so in that case, you get a different order, and you also get echoes played as one piece. It doesn't go echoes part 1, echoes part
trippy.
2, the way they do it in Adrian's versions. Yeah. So it's kind of cool. The audio is much clearer, although the audio in the old stuff's pretty good. It's well balanced.
I agree. I mean, for what they were doing, it's kind of amazing. But you mentioned a $700 Pink Floyd box set. Are you a Pink Floyd fan, perhaps, Larry?
No, not at all. No, they just fell out of the sky on my head one day.
All right. When did you first discover Pink Floyd?
I think for sure. I mean, I think I'd certainly heard Money, but I never clocked it as a kid. I would have been 11. So when The Wall came out, it was like 79, right?
I believe that's right.
I was 16, so imagine how prime that is. And And that, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 was a huge, huge hit.
And wasn't that funny?
You'd hear it on AM radio. You heard it everywhere, right? They were lucky that it was a hit because they were bankrupt, so.
Oh, yeah. And Dave Gilmour didn't want to play on it. He's like, disco? Really? Like,
they were all sorts of stories on that. Boy, we could do a 5-hour podcast here. So The Wall came out. My dad and my sister came home one day, and my sister talked my dad into buying a cassette of The Wall because she'd heard some of the songs. And she's younger than me, but she was always like into music as well. So she brought that home, and I remember going, to my dad, I swear, or just to the family in general, I was like, don't buy records on cassette. Cassettes are going to fall, pre-recorded cassettes, you know. I'm
Sure.
like, they fall apart. They disintegrate. You should have bought a double LP of this.
Already at 16, you were like, come on.
I was 16, I think. Yeah. 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 It's December 79, right? So I would have been 16.
Amazing.
Yeah. I was all into it because I was making cassettes off of my friends. I would go to my friend's house and borrow all his records and
Right.
his Yes albums and King Crimson and shit. I think. Well, right after that, really, that's when I really got deeper in. So at that point, I was probably listening to like Beach Boys and Simon and Garfunkel and things that my parents had turned me on to. So yeah, I heard The Wall. I didn't understand that it was a story. I just thought it was the craziest thing to listen to because
Sure.
it's really collagey if you
Oh, totally.
think of it that way.
Yeah.
And then I heard is that back when FM radio was good? I heard a Jim Ladd, I think it was called Inner Visions with Jim Ladd.
So those interview records they would send to stations, right?
Yeah, it was on LP, and I
Yep.
did have a copy of the LP later that I snagged at a radio station. But it was Jim Ladd interviewing Roger, I think, and just talking about the story of The Wall and putting that. And I was like, oh, that's what it is. And Roger Waters, of course. And then, so then I was like, well, what? My friend goes, well, have you heard Dark Side of the Moon? I'm like, what's that? You know? And he brought it over, and we had to play the record in one room, but then turn the speakers on in my mom's ceramic studio and listen to it in there because they were in the living room watching, you know, I don't know, Rockford Files,
Right.
you know. So I go, so we go in the
It's
other
a good
room and just
trade-off.
sit there.
It's a
Yeah,
good
and
trade-off.
there's little these shitty Radio Shack speakers my dad had up on the wall, and we listened to it, Dark Side of the Moon. I just went, wow, that's really good too. And then it was certainly like Wish You Were Here and Animals and all that. And then if my friend, this friend of mine had been living in Japan, he had all these records from Taiwan, which had never signed the international copyright agreement. So
Okay.
at the they call it the PX or something on a military base, you could go buy all these records for like 50 cents each. And they were really weird. Like they'd just take an album and make a knockoff LP of it. And he had the record called A Nice Pair, which is the early Pink
Sure.
Floyd.
Yeah, it's the first two records, yeah.
And he goes, you're going to hate this, but I loved it. So, yeah, it kind of kept going like that, you know? Every new record of theirs I would find, or old record I would find, I'd find something I liked about it. Because in a way, what's really cool about Pink Floyd is it's really simple. There's nothing really ever going on that's technically complicated to a degree. I mean, musically, instrument-wise. But the way everything sounds and the way it all comes together and the way things are arranged and written and Roger's lyrics and all kinds of things are really, really good. I think that one of the things I took away was that I just learned a lot about how to put a record together because a lot of it's studio stuff. There's little things like there's a song called Quicksilver on the More soundtrack that is really somebody just rewinding tape and letting it rub against the playhead while it's going fast or rewinding or fast forwarding. I'm not even sure. And then putting that into like a plate echo or a studio chamber. And it's just this, it makes this weird washy sound that's kind of foreign, alien, you know. And I'm like, oh, okay. And one night, you know, so like over the years, I figured out how they made a lot of these sounds. I've even got I made an instrumental once. It's really short. I'll have to find it and send it to you. Where I figured out the Crybaby, plugging into the Crybaby pedal backwards and with a Strat trick that's the middle of echoes where those seagull sounds are.
Yeah.
So you plug backwards into a Crybaby and then you play like your tone knob or something on the Strat and it oscillates. It makes that wee, 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 that sound. And then, of course, he put it into like his Benson Echo Rec and all that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. This Benson Echo Rec or Benson Echo Rec 2, which I guess was a hangover from Sid Barrett's setup. He used Selmer amps?
Yeah, that would have been one of the common amps then before Wem, you know, the Wem amps and stuff.
Was that a British amp?
Yeah. Selmer, kind of a big bulky things if I remember.
Yeah, and he'd use a Vox Wah-Wah fuzz face and this Benson Echo Rec 2. What does the Benson Echo Rec 2 do? for their sound.
It's an echo, an analog echo device, but it uses a metallic drum that it kind of records magnetically onto this piece of metal, and as it's spinning and plays it back.
What?
I don't know how. I've never understood this. I've sat and looked at him, and I don't understand. You'll see he's got a fuzz face right next to him that he's whacking a couple of times, and then he's doing a Benson Echo Rec. Yeah, you'll see it sitting there.
That's
too.
amazing.
And he's doing slide guitar stuff into the echo with a little bit of fuzz obviously on it, and yeah, cool sound. I mean, well, that's one of the things I love about this film. I wrote all these notes to thinking about it while I was watching. That I love that I got to see how the sounds are made. Like I've never been.
Yes.
I wasn't even a musician at this point, really. Like I never took music classes. I never learned how to play, and I was just fascinated by the sounds. If that makes sense.
Right.
So watching this film as a teenager, I was like, oh, that's okay. That's a guitar with a slide going into an echo. Okay, that's a gong being hit. That's an organ, or a grand piano tone clusters, or you see it identically, and you need to see like Nick Mason playing sometimes with mallets and not sticks,
Right, and they have like a grand piano with a mic on it, going through a Leslie
for echoes,
So you're like, oh wow, like that is actually a piano being affected, not like an electric piano. Yeah, there's that scene where when Echoes starts getting into the funky part in Echoes Part 1 in this film, and it has a really long tracking shot of a couple minutes around the band, and you're seeing the back of the amps, and you're seeing inside the equipment. I was like, I wonder if Larry is like, I know what that is. I've seen that. Oh, I wish I had that. Like if it was just like a dream to see all this vintage stuff.
When I was a kid, it was a total like wow, and it took me a long time to understand even like what everything was. I didn't really know like what guitar amplifier meant, maybe not 100%. Kind of had an idea, but like I built a kid a fuzz. I was taking electronics classes in high school, and this guy said, "Can you build me a fuzz box?" And I found a schematic and I built it, but I didn't put a switch on it because I thought you just plug in and that's fuzzy. He's like, "Can you make a switch on it?" And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Because I want to turn it on and off." God, I wish I had that, man. I wish I'd snagged that.
That is such a good idea where it's just like, yeah, there's nothing, there's no dials, there's nothing on here.
Yeah, I think Jack White would like that, probably.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because, you talked about time and money.
2 song titles.
Exactly. Oh my God. The way that metal came into be was they had the luxury. They could just stay in the studio and fuck around.
It wasn't actually the success or failure of Atom Heart Mother. It was the contract was basically unlimited recording time with EMI.
Wow. And how long had they had that contract?
Since they started.
What?
That's why I have an interview with John Wood, who did he recorded Arnold Lane and See Emily Play. Because he was the main co-owner and main engineer at Sound Techniques in London.
Okay. And
he and Joe Boyd did tons of records together, like Fairport Convention and Incredible String Band, Nick Drake. So John and Joe Boyd ran the UFO Club, where Pink Floyd were playing before they had any records out.
Right.
And he got them into the studio to do some demos and then do the single, or actually to do the single, and with John Engineering. And then when they got signed to EMI, they were like, they really wanted to keep using Joe and maybe even John, but it's like, no, you have to record at EMI and you have to use a staff producer.
Was that Norman
Smith, okay. Hurricane Smith, if you want to dig into that history, and who had recorded, been an engineer on early Beatles records and stuff, and right. Obviously a really good engineer, so they had to use him, even though actually they went back to Sound Techniques to record See Emily Play and had John engineer that, who's generally not credited. So they had from my understanding, and I could be incorrect, but I've read. If you saw my library of Pink Floyd books, you'd cry because it's a full on shelf full of things that, and some books that are very
I
out of
wouldn't
print.
expect any less from you, Larry. This is
I'm
awesome.
thorough, man. I'm thorough.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Well, okay. Well, if a band has full access to like a recording studio,
right.
like where does that end for something like EMI?
Well, there were three Abbey Road. I've been to Abbey Road. There's three rooms, and most of the time, geez, I'm trying to remember now. Dark Side was almost all done in Studio 3. Actually, I was just talking to Alan Parsons recently too, who engineered that.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll tell you later, but I sent him a query about what we're talking about. The Beatles famously mostly use Studio 2, which has the steps that go up to the high control room. Studio 1 is the gigantic orchestral room that you wouldn't generally do a rock session in.
Okay.
Just because you don't, they usually have it hired out for film soundtracks and such. And 3 is kind of the smaller of the rooms. It is the smaller of the rooms, but it's still quite fine. Obviously, you see it in this film. You see them working in there, and then the canteen is downstairs.
In the 70s, there were mega stars, right? Who were spending longer periods of time in the studio. It just seems weird that like Pink Floyd would be like, "See ya, this is ours for a while. We're just gonna try to figure out what we're gonna make for this next record," and they had no time constraints. That's incredible.
Well, I was signed to a label that had their own studio in the late '80s, and we had theoretically unlimited studio time, but we didn't. Do you know what I mean? So there wasn't pressure, and we weren't paying by the hour, but it was also like, yeah, how many more days do we need to get this done?
Was this Vomit launch?
Yeah. For our third and fourth records, actually.
Yeah. Pink Floyd, the Beatles, and Vomit launch.
Yeah, the only bands.
The only bands that got this.
Yeah, I mean, or if you look at those Talk stories about your last two Talk records, they spent like a year making them or something crazy, with my friend Phil Brown, and I think that's another case where it's kind of being absorbed by the label.
Does that happen anymore?
People build their own studios and never finish their records, so that's yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think. No one's ever come to me. The longest I've ever spent on a record was actually Quasi. Like, I think we spent almost a month, off and on making field studies.
Oh, wow.
But that's when the Jackpot was really cheap and I was cheap. So, and they had a record label that would give them some money. So, I mean, the whole question of like, does extra time in the studio make you better? I think that the one thing it allowed in this situation with this band was because this band obviously went through they started with Syd Barrett as the songwriter, basically. There's some collaborations, and there's one Roger song on the first record, but Syd was writing the songs, or they were jamming, and they're like, well, the jams are interesting, but we need more songs, and so they focused on his songs. And then he had his problems, which is a very complicated story and is usually told incorrectly. And then he left the band and kind of wandered off to do his own thing. And they got his old friend David in Gilmour, and who used to actually show him how to use echo units and stuff like that, which is even funnier. So that left the band at this point like, who are we? What do we do? So then they're left with just the kind of idea of their instrumental jams, like say Interstellar Overdrive or Power Talk H on the first record. So then it became, Saucer Full of Secrets, that song, or Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, which is a Roger song based around a riff and some stolen words. And, so you kind of had this idea like, now we're just kind of this slightly more lethargic band that does these longer pieces,
That's a good way to put it. Those albums are a little lethargic. I love them, but yeah, they're sleepy.
Yeah, and you have some of Richard Wright's songs, which are
Paint
kind of
Box,
charming,
things like that.
Paint Box. I like them, and people always bang
too.
on them, but I think there's some really good ones on there.
I didn't know that, because I wanted to ask you about that, because this film also really allows you to see how good Richard Wright is, and also what a monster drummer Nick Mason could be. that you normally would not ever expect. Like, he is a rock fucking god in this thing. He looks so cool, and he's just
Yeah.
bashing away. And I was like, I don't think either I'd forgotten from watching the film so long ago, but listening to the records, I never think about the power of Nick Mason.
He is so important to what the band sounds like and how their parts fit together, I think. And you see that in this film on those, especially the stuff shot at Pompeii. You really see him like holding down the drums really well. You know, one of the few drummers he ever mentions being a fan of was Ginger Baker. And when you see that film and you think about that, it's like, oh yeah, a little more jazzy, a little more explosive,
But hard.
Yeah, hitting fairly hard, but also softer at times. Just at the controls is all pitter patter toms with mallets.
What's the song where he's just doing the repetition?
Oh, that's in Saucer Full of Secrets. That pattern. I've had the luxury of seeing. I've never saw any version of Pink Floyd live. I just didn't have any money when they came back around, minus Roger Waters in the '80s. And but I've seen David Gilmour live a number of times, and one of the tours, the first tour I saw, had Richard Wright as his keyboard player.
Oh, cool.
So they did Echoes. I saw them in like a nice theater in Oakland, and they played Echoes, and I saw 2 nights of that. They did Dark Side stuff, things like that.
And their voices together are beautiful. Like, that's the other thing. I just forgot that Richard Wright sang like throughout Echoes. Like, he sings right along with Dave Gilmour.
Right. I mean, there's something to really be said about that. I think the thing that you really see in this too, and you and I have been in lots of bands and stuff, is that this is a very, at Pink Floyd's best, it is a very collaborative band, and everybody just does the right thing to support what's happening in the moment.
Yeah.
And you've got 3 singers, in the band. But nobody's like singing all the time. There's not like a stack. There's very in the studio they'll bring in the backing singer ladies.
Yeah.
And they'll do those pads. But live, I don't think I ever saw them really do like the 3 of them, like Roger, David, and Rick, rarely ever sing together. They don't have like Beatles harmonies.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say. They're not the Everly Brothers plus one. They're not doing that. They're doing individual voices or just support 2 voices or alternating, like on is it Time, where Richard sings like 1 verse here and there, things like that. There's just really cool, and using that to just change the textures and change the stuff. I think that's really interesting, but I think Richard Wright is long underappreciated. When you watch this film, you see him doing a lot of stuff and staying pretty busy, most of the time,
Yeah. Yeah, some of the organ work is just really beautiful and complicated, and then he'll switch over to the piano stuff. And even seeing them in the studio working on Us and Them, and seeing him just beautiful, And it's so funny, like, I've been watching a lot of documentaries. There's all those British like knockoff documentaries about Pink Floyd where that's just, like, they talk to Norman and they talk to the guy who did the sound effects for Adam's Heart Mother, and people, talking about their experience. But one of the funny things was I didn't know about One of These Days that was 2 basses until I was watching the documentaries of these people talking about it. And I guess Dave Gilmour was playing something on a guitar like it, and then Dave Gilmour talks about it in this documentary. They had a bass that just sounded like shit. So they sent one of their people out to get new bass strings, and they just didn't show up. Like, hours went by, and they were like, we got to do something.
I've never heard that one.
So Dave Gilmour is playing the bass on it, the one that sounds good. And then he says the other one is just like Roger Waters going,
yeah.
And it was like they didn't want it to be like that, but it's killer because of it. And I didn't know that was 2 basses. And I also didn't know that was Nick Mason's voice sped up and then slowed down. I didn't know who did that. I always assumed it was Roger Waters, but so Nick Mason is a singer.
Well, no, there's even stranger. There's Scream Thy Last Scream, which is a Syd Barrett song that Nick sings in the studio.
Is that on the second record?
It's not on anything until the early years box set.
Okay.
It shows up there because it was always a bootlegged kind of outtake. It was never released until then, whenever that was.
But it is amazing how in the course of the 7 years of them being a band up to this point, how each of those records is like kind of a restart in a funny way, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways to say in the history of Pink Floyd to say that there's really very few things of like incredible quality generated. And if you say, people kind of call like the period from Dark Side through the Wall like the grand period, or whatever you want to call it, and those are all really well done, really well smart thought up, put together records. But everything leading up to that, up to Dark Side, is hinting at that the there's songs like Childhood's End on the more La Vallée soundtrack, which is a Gilmour composition. It's just fantastic, and it really kind of hints at something like Time on Dark Side of the Moon or something, with a big epic guitar solo and lyrics about being born and dying and stuff like that, which I think just kind of just is sort of a placeholder, and then it's going to turn into something bigger, right?
Right.
And so you see, especially that's what I was really fascinated about when I picked up the early years box set, because I knew a lot of that stuff. I had a lot of bootlegs and things, but you really hear this journey that just started it ends right before Dark Side, and you're like, yep. It all kind of is just about to happen.
The weirdest thing about the film too is that Metal had not been released yet when they went to record this. They had recorded it, but they had not put it out yet. But they did dip into earlier music from Saucerful of Secrets
and Set the Controls. That's from their second record.
Yeah, Careful with That Axe, Eugene.
That was just a staple. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you have some issues with the film. Like, let's get into that.
What I wish the film was. Then this. Sorry, Adrian. I'm sure he's going to listen to this. I really wish the film was just Pink Floyd live at Pompeii. Like what the title says. I do appreciate everything else that's in it, but I wish it was just a film of the band playing songs with that quality of film that they had, and the quality of audio they were capturing. I wish they had been able to just do one of their full sets of that era, because I think that's one of the peak eras of them as a live band. Later it became so structured, they had to play Dark Side every night, etc.
So are you talking about taking away like the cutaways? Because then the first one that they did with an hour, it is only them in Pompeii.
I'm pretty sure actually they didn't play echoes all the way through, because I don't think a roll of film or the audio. Well, I don't know if they had 2 tape decks, but I don't think they did. So they probably had a 33-minute limit on the tape decks if they're running at 15 IPS. So
that's a really good point.
They could have maybe done it, but they might have been running it at or 15. Yeah, if they ran it at 30, they would have had a 16-minute roll.
Do you mind the pace of the film? Like, do you mind that it like takes its time for those long shots?
No, I love that kind of thing. I'm fine with that. I can watch the most boring thing in the world as long as the music's good. But
agreed.
I really wish it was just more of their set from that time, like, and it was all just captured there as the edit it so the day gets longer and it gets dark at the end, which you do kind of see, and just have them playing their songs and don't show us that. I don't need all those cutaways of bubbling mud and people wandering around in architecture.
Right,
I really don't give a fuck. I'm there to watch the band.
That scene of them walking on volcanic ash, they just want to get through it. They're like, okay, we're gonna run as fast as we can through this. We're really uncomfortable.
Yeah, you've done music videos, and it's like they're the worst day of your life. It's like, oh God, there's a camera in your face, and it's like, I just want to play music. I don't want to be lip syncing to my song or walking around trying to act like I'm doing something funny. I mean, it's awful. It's awful. I think it's the worst experience in the world. So I can understand their discomfort as they're walking around.
They're like, can we just play our music? We already
Yeah.
did this. And the director's probably like, hey, I got an idea, boys. Let's have some fun. Let's have you run through the smoke.
They got time to do that, but they couldn't record like more than 3 songs. Well, they spent
Right.
3 days there or
Right.
something, 4 days, whatever it was.
6 days. And also, they didn't have enough power.
Oh, yeah.
They got there and
Yeah.
they realized that they'd screwed up. So they had to run a cable into town. They made a deal with the mayor. They blocked off
Yeah.
Pompeii for 6 days. But some kids did sneak in and they let them kind of stay. They were like, be quiet, and you can watch that. But it's so funny. I was reading about the legacy of this film. And one of the biggest fans is Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead.
Sure.
But his brother hated it. And his brother said, he described it as Dave Gilmour sitting on his ass, playing guitar, and Roger Waters with long, greasy hair, sandals, and dusty flares, staggering over and picking up a big beater and whacking a gong. It's ridiculous. So you can imagine the two are just like, no, this is how you make a film. Like, this is what Radiohead should do. And then Colin's just like, oh, this is garbage. I just love that dynamic.
That's pretty funny. That's what I mean. You can take a lot of inspiration from it, or you can just slag it off and say it's a piece of garbage. I mean, I think that's what I mean. In my mind, if it was like if you had the quality of what you get, like when they're playing echoes and stuff, done in that environment. Because when I used to be so confused, I watched the film, I'm like, why all of a sudden does it look like they're on a TV soundstage? Like, oh, they actually were. They went to France and did more shit and tried. And Rick Wright's beard disappears and their clothes look a little different. And then they tracked like one, two, actually 3 songs were tracked on that soundstage. So they weren't even performed at Pompeii. So Careful That Axe Eugene and Set the Controls were both done in France on a soundstage,
right?
Not in Pompeii. And then the dumb Seamus rip-off song with the blues song with the dog was done there in the TV or film studio. And I mean, I'm like, well, so it's not at Pompeii, which, I mean, I'm not saying that because the title says it. I'm getting all mad. But I'm just like, I'd love to see like a film that had been really, really captured their set from that era. Because I think that was a real high point era for them as just great stage performers. They've been touring their butts off. They've been to Japan, all over the world. And, they were like a middle ground successful English rock band. Not super huge, but not super huge, but not super unknown.
Yeah, but they're so forceful live, like just like when it gets into that funky part of echoes, like it just sounds great.
That's one of my favorite. Yeah.
Watching this accidentally high, it really was so different. Especially the hour-long version, like, it has like the part where it shows like, how audio is recorded on film, with the
optical stripe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a couple jump scares watching this film high. It probably wasn't necessarily made for it to be like a scholarly look at Pink Floyd, where they are, and we're gonna honor their concert, and we're gonna have time slip away, and we're gonna go to dark and the light. I think to them they were probably like, how do we make our money back? How many college students are gonna see this? What do we do? What's the track listing? But to credit, it sounds amazing, no matter how weird the choices are, or what we could have wanted. I don't know how they recorded it. Do you have any insight?
The Pompeii footage for sure was an 8-track 1-inch recorder. I always thought it was 16-track, but I heard it was 8-track, and then they took it after that and dumped it over to 16-track and continued to sweeten it or for mixing or something. And maybe even just as a safety, honestly, because that's one of those things you get paranoid about. And I don't know, probably similar for the Paris footage, I would assume, but it was tracked really well. They probably had to submix the drums to 2 tracks or whatever you would do there. And, the guys did a good job on the capture of that. I'm not sure if the roadies were helping figure that out or exactly what happened there. But you got good quality, and I think in a way, like not having an audience is kind of, you don't have all that. You don't have to if you were. I've done a lot of archive work on some live recordings, like a Melanie live in '74 record I mixed a while back, and I get into fights with the producers because I'd be like, well, they'd be like, well, make sure it all fades out after the song's over. I'm like, there's crowd noise. Like the crowd noise has to be continuous.
Right.
And then you get in these arguments with people that don't understand that. And I'm like, no, you need to keep the energy up, or at least the ambience in the background of like, people coughing, clapping. It was just like, kind of, what's wrong with these producers? But it's, I just worked on something for Independent Project Records. It's going to come out, and it's like really super awesome punk rock, 1981. And then we want to keep the energy up and like keep the crowd noise doing just enough to get us to the next song. Like, wow, bam, like
yeah, absolutely.
Keep it, make a good fun record.
Right.
So like it's kind of neat with Live at Pompeii that there's no crowd noise. So it's just like this, the end echoes, and it's just kind of like, okay, it's over,
Is it fun for you to see the studio and them, rehearsing songs for Dark Side of the Moon and ordering eggs and tea and trying to get an apple pie, and
they only have round apple pies.
That's
I've eaten at that commissary, actually.
Amazing.
I had lasagna. That was the special that day, I think, and a pint of Guinness. You can have Guinness down there. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty funny. It's that band, when you try to interview them, it always looks a little difficult, doesn't it? There's always a bit of like,
Yeah, it's almost a little bit, it's like a kinder, gentler Lou Reed interview where they're like, you asked a stupid fucking question.
Yeah, like the cutaway questions are, do you think someone with the given your equipment could do exactly what you're doing? It's like, no, of course not. Just because they're using a few little like techniques and synthesizers and things, like, doesn't mean they're not playing music. It's just, and then there's the footage of Roger Waters where he looks really stoned.
Yes.
When he's being interviewed. He looks incredibly high, which is not really usually all that. Back then, I guess for a while, he was kind of more of a stoner.
Well, and these guys are constantly eating in the studio, like oysters and pot pies, and then they're like, they have like zero body fat. It's just like so weird. You're like, okay,
yeah, it's the only time they eat. That's what I was
exactly
thinking. There's probably no money. There's no money.
But it's super fun to hear things like them recording the synthesizers on the run and it not being there yet, and like things that they tried that didn't work out, or Dave Gilmour playing like on Brain Damage, and you're like, oh, don't do that. Do it again, because like it's not right.
And this was my question to Alan, and I might have an answer in a day or two for you. So
excellent.
I'm gonna say, and we can edit this out. We can edit this differently. I don't know. I'm gonna say my gut feeling about all that footage is that it's I know they were in the tail end of finishing this album, and I'm pretty sure that the couple of days they allowed Adrian in there, they really weren't working on the album. They were just playing over the backing tapes that were done, as far as I know. I mean, the mixing's not done. You don't hear, obviously, in the mixing, like Alan did the echo for Us and Them, us,
right,
all that stuff, because you don't hear that on there, which is kind of fascinating while Richard's playing. But Gilmour's part on Brain Damage isn't what's on the record. The synthesizer stuff they're playing over on the run isn't what's on the record. And I think that they're just kind of showing how the sounds were made, and they're like, yeah, whatever. I mean, it does lead to my favorite, though. My favorite thing was the quote, what is it? Where would rock and roll be without feedback? Which Gilmour says at one point. Which
I know.
I think that's really funny. Actually, I emailed Alan Parsons and I got this quote. Yes, it was all staged. I was there with the camera often pointing at me, and I tried to get footage, but Adrian Maben maintained that there simply wasn't any. So the footage you see of them working in quotes on Dark Side of the Moon is just like a filmed scene. It's not really them in the studio making the record.
They seem to really be having to defend rock and roll. Like, they're like, rock and roll isn't dead.
Yeah.
It's very much alive. And it's so funny to think that here's Pink Floyd. They're at the height of their powers. And, this interviewer is like, well, surely it's got to end, right? And it's just kind of trying to push some buttons. And they're just like, we're making one of the most successful records you'll ever hear. Just wait, you moron.
That's kind of it's a crazy theme, because that starts, in the original rock and roll era. If you think like Memphis and Sun Studios and all that kind of stuff. Even then, it's like, this is a fad. It's going to be a fad, and it's going to go
Absolutely.
away. And then they, then you have all these bands in the 60s and into the early 70s. Like, well, it's still a fad. It's going to go away. And obviously it didn't. But, that's such a crazy thing. And I remember, like, when Richard Martin was writing for Willamette Week here in town, one time I was at a party at his house, and all this, like, earlier, like, kind of electronica or whatever people wanted to call it, EDM and stuff was happening. And he goes, well, you think, guitars are going to be passe here soon? I'm like, Jesus Christ, you journalists are so fucking lazy. Like, it's like trotting some stupid shit out like that. Because no, if it does start to take over, then people go, fuck that, and they start punk bands,
Oh, do you remember when guitars came back with the Hives and White Stripes and Strokes? Rock is back, baby.
Yeah, they would say it like it hadn't gone away. And I'm like, I don't know. I've been down at Satyricon every night, and I saw lots of rock bands, man.
It's incredible. That's so funny.
It's all kind of... It's just this dumb way to look at, music, as if it's like black and white or off and on or whatever it is. It's just so stupid.
Yeah, agreed.
But anyway, I'm not saying Richard was stupid, because he's not, but he's a very insightful person, except for that moment in my life. Oh, for me as a recording geek, the Sennheiser 409 microphones. That's the vocal mics that you see all through the film that they're singing into, which have the one black side of screen on the back, and then they have a gold screen on the side, that the pickup side, right?
Okay.
And I still don't own any. I think Jeff Saltzman has one or two that I've tried. They're wonderful mics. They're just dynamic mics. And they have a 609 now that looks like that form factor, but it's not really anything.
Why did they get rid of the 409 then?
A lot of those kind of mics would be too expensive to actually build in the current age to the quality they were built at. That's why you don't really see generally like a U47 that's completely identical to the old Neumanns or something. The companies that were building them can't build them exactly the same, just because of parts and costs.
How much does a mic like that cost to make, like back in like 1960
back
or 70?
Then, I don't know. I don't know how much they were retailing for or anything. Probably, I would assume like $150 or something in that economy,
Right.
which would be like 400 or something now. Because a good dynamic mic now is, like a Shure SM7 or a EV Electro Voice RE20 or whatever it is. Those are going to be, $300, $400, $500 for the top dynamic mics. We're not talking about expensive condenser mics and stuff. But I love seeing those mics in there, and you also... It ties into another music video thing where there's a horrible song that we all know called Supernatural by Santana, and Rob Thomas from Match Dick 20 or whatever it's called sings in the song, and in the video they use the Sennheiser 409, but they have it turned around so you see the gold side, so it looks like more luxurious. But
they have it backwards.
Like, yeah, you're singing the wrong side of the mic, moron.
Oh my god, that's so beautiful.
Oh, I think
they're
that's
just
really
like
funny.
They're like, this looks great. Look
Oh
at
yeah,
how cool
yeah.
these mics are.
Turn the mic around. It looks really, really luxurious.
Oh,
and you're using it wrong.
Wow.
And the other music video thing, of course, which you mentioned earlier, where there's the long shot behind all the gear, and you see Pink Floyd London stenciled on the back of their amps and everything. But the video by the Beastie Boys where they're shooting it like on a weird like volcano active thermal area in New Zealand, I believe. And they do a shot behind their gear, and someone stenciled in Pink Floyd London on one of their amps. because it was like it's identical. They're just like, well, we got to do this.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Come on.
Yeah.
I think that's really funny. I think that's interesting that that's something that was probably done, maybe a little bit under duress to the band members, to shoot this Pompeii thing and everything. Uh, that it becomes sort of iconic in its own right. That there's things of it, and even David Gilmour went back like a handful of years ago, and did a concert there with his touring band.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, there's you can see a video of that, and it's like completely crazy because it's like it's a smaller invited group, to see it, and there's a little audience, but it's not a huge place, obviously, and they rig it up with like crazy cool lights and all this stuff. It's pretty incredible to watch because it's completely the opposite of what's going on here.
Yeah, this film was a staple of, being a teenager and a college student. Like, it was readily available to watch either at midnight movie or, just getting it from the video store or whatever. But this, Song Remains the Same, Erga Music Award. There were certain things you could find easily. There was like always like 5. You go to a video store and they'd have the same 5 damn videos. You'd be like, do you have DOA? And they'd be like, no. And you're like, okay, I guess I'll get Song Remains the Same again.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there was it was the unheard music. It was kind of limited what you were able to find. But I mean, consider, like, I know I'm just a couple years older than you. And when I was in high school, we didn't have like a VHS player at my house. There wasn't rentals. I graduated high school in 81. And I think a few people maybe I knew might have had VHS players or Beta or whatever. And there might have been like one rental shop, but I wasn't able to watch things I wanted to see as a kid at all, which I think would be really such a weird experiment. And we lived out in the woods, and we got 3 or 4 TV channels depending on the weather. And when I first saw this film, I went to wasn't a midnight movie. It was playing. I was growing up near Nevada City, California. It was playing in a little theater. There would be like a theater. This guy would do like an independent movie nights, and he would use this old theater up there, a historic building. And he showed, I remember seeing different movies in different places. Like I saw Tommy somewhere once, but he must have been a music fan because he would do a lot of music films. And so there was one night, it was in this, I forget the name of the theater. I could walk to it if I was in Nevada City. I know exactly where it is. And he did a screening of Live at Pompeii. And my friend, Mikhail Graham, who was like kind of like almost like a mentor to me in high school. He created his own electronic music. He was really into like all the krautrock and Brian Eno and all that kind of stuff. And so he had all these like synthesizers and stuff. And he was putting out compilation cassettes. I was on some of those. He was doing radio shows, and he let me sit in and play records.
That's killer.
And so he played before the film. Like one time I went to see a movie, and Jonathan Richman played before because he lived up there back then.
Oh my God!
Like I can't remember what movie it was, but Jonathan just sat there.
It's probably
with
Porky's. Porky's.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Porky's.
Okay.
I remember I went to see Slacker, and Jonathan was sitting with my mom and my grandmother. And this was after, of course, years later when I've been playing with some of those people that ran Slacker and played shows with them, like Class I and stuff. And I'm sitting there in the theater, and Jonathan's sitting in front of us, and my mom goes, "My son's in a band called Vomit Launch," and he's like, "Huh?" He turns around after the movie and tells us 6 band names, like Puke Rocket would be good,
Yes.
But yeah, so my friend Mikhail Graham, who's also no longer with us, but he played like this kind of droney, like sort of Tangerine Dream drone cool stuff with little drum machines, and opened for the film. And I got to watch him play, and I watched the film sitting in a beanbag chair in the front.
Oh my God.
Laying on the floor.
Yeah, I love it. When I was talking to Jerry A about Decline of Western Civilization, Poison Idea opened for the film. And
no way.
Yes.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And it just cracks me up. And then he said people were stage diving during the film off the little proscenium, the little stage part.
Oh,
oh my God, so
where were they
great.
showing it at?
He saw it at the Fifth Avenue, downtown, in Portland. That's over by the
Oh,
Portland State University.
right,
So
right. Oh, that's so crazy.
that was
Wow.
so important to me as a teenager to go to Cinema 21 or Fifth Avenue or the Guild and see these music
Hmm.
films. Again, like you said, I did, being a few years younger than you, get like the total video thing with Night Flight and MTV
Hmm.
and,
Yeah,
Fridays and all these things kind of coming at the
yeah,
same time.
yeah.
Where before it was like, Midnight Special and Don Kirshner were
Hmm.
kind of, the visual lifeline for certain things. It wasn't like you were going to turn on, PBS and see Pompeii played. Although it would have been appropriate. I would have liked to have seen
Yeah.
like a Masterpiece Theater where they're like, tonight.
There, there is a KQED in San
Yes,
Francisco did shoot that whole Pink Floyd
that
thing,
is
and
amazing.
my dad's cousin was one of the announcers and people that put shows together and stuff there actually back then. It's so funny, but that footage is really good too. That comes in that early box set. If you the early years box set, if anyone wants to dive deep into that. But yeah, you're right. There in the growing up in Northern California, there was a show that would come on after Saturday Night Live on NBC, and it was called Video West, and it was an independent production being done in the Bay Area. I
Night
don't
Flight
know
picked up on
who.
those.
Yeah, they might have been showing them later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they would be like,
yeah,
here's a look at artists in the Bay Area, and it'd be
mm,
like Journey,
yeah,
Jefferson, Starship, and The Residents.
yeah. Or like I saw John Fahey on there,
Yeah,
which
it's
is like,
cool.
wow, how cool is that?
Yeah,
So there was that. Yeah, Night Flight. That was like a cable channel, obviously, or cable
it's a cable show. Yeah,
offering.
yep,
Yeah, show that I saw later. But we were out saw it in the woods. We didn't have cable when
right.
cable
Oh,
was
that's
a
cool
thing.
that you had that though.
Yeah,
That's a really good show. Video West stuff's pretty
yeah,
amazing.
it was amazing. Yeah, so I was always interested. And when I went to film school, I wanted to do something that combined film and music. That was kind of one of the ideas, like Don't Look Back, Bob Dylan, D.A. Pennebaker kind of thing, or this film, Live at Bombay, or I'm trying to think of other things that were kind of inspirational, but I wanted to do stuff that kind of somehow combined. And this is pre MTV, mind you.
Right.
When I was thinking this along these lines, I was fascinated by music videos that you would see occasionally.
Well, this leads up to these questions I have for you. I didn't know you went to film school, so this will lead into the next question. But
Yeah,
if you could have made a music documentary about any band, who would it have been?
I wish there was more. Um, I wish somebody had done something on Joy Division where they really sat them down, interviewed them together, and kind of showed where they're all coming from and stuff. Because I think that's we talk about how there's a democracy that you see, the last fragments of a democracy in Pink Floyd that you see in this film, um, and you lose it as soon as Dark Side happens, really, to a degree. But Joy Division to me were one of the most democratic bands because it really was a melding of four ideas, and unique musicians, and a writer, singer, of course, but a unique held vision, So I think that when you find that kind of thing, like most bands aren't democracies. People can pretend all they want, but U2 is really like the Edge and Bono to a degree.
Right.
Ideas come in from the other guys. That's great, and financially they're really helped out by doing four-way credits and stuff like that. But most bands usually have kind of a core, that's not just all of them.
Right.
And I think that's fascinating when you find that. So that would be something. If I was able to fly in a time machine, it'd be that, or just Sid Barrett era Pink Floyd. If there was more footage of them interacting, talking, being interviewed, it would be pretty fascinating because that was just I think Sid was just a really unique person, and I think his artistic take on being in a band, his take as being a painter and an artist, it was being applied to being in a band, which is I think the thing that's always misunderstood. That he didn't see why they should keep repeating what they were doing. He's like, no.
Yeah, there's a few of those archival interviews with Sid and Roger where,
Yeah.
mostly they're talking about like, you're awfully loud, and he's like,
why does it have to be so loud?
I know. And they're just like, can we talk about something else besides the volume and our drug use? Let's talk about the
Yeah.
music. Well, also,
Yeah.
what Pink Floyd album would you have wanted to
Mhm.
be involved with?
Oh, God, those sessions must have been interminable. I mean, some of them. I mean, you know, you read stories about or hear them talk about "Wish You Were Here," which I think is one of probably my top favorite records ever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a list making kind of person or any of that kind of stuff, but I can always just put that record on. So it's a beautiful album. It's got a beautiful vibe to it. Obviously, it's about Sid, some of it. But man, when Brian Humphreys is the engineer on that, and I think they burned his brain out, like it just days of like nothing happening, nothing getting done, just like kind of slogging around. I think that'd be hard. So I think if I had to be at the tracking of one of them or help record it, I would wonder if it'd be more interesting to the pressure maybe of the wall. I've hung out with Bob Ezrin a few times. That might be interesting, and watching Bob work because he's a really good taskmaster. or Dark Side, and Alan and I are kind of friends, and I'm like, man, I would just love to have seen him as a young guy just kicking ass, as an engineer, because wow. But it still would have been kind of a tedious session because there's they're trying to make a certain thing happen, and it's going to take some time, right?
Yes.
It's difficult. So I always think like I'm kind of glad I didn't. That when you record somebody, you end up kind of being less of a fan because you saw how the sausage was made.
That makes total sense.
Yeah,
I've never thought of that, but yeah, I could totally see you're like, oh, I see how this was made, and some of the mystery is
Or I sat through the art. I sat through the fights. I sat through the things I try not to discuss. You mean
Dark Side of the Moon wasn't a one take affair? That's what I heard. It was just all done.
Yeah,
like
just one take, banged it out.
Yeah.
Sure, kids.
Oh my God, Larry, this has been amazing. At the end of every episode, I ask the same question by Taylor, depending on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
On a scale from 1 to 99, how many Dave Gilmour hits pounding on his fuzz face through the Echo? What is it called?
The Benson Echo Rec 2. Yeah.
How many times him bashing that do you give it on a scale of 1 to 99? Dave Gilmour bashes.
I think I'd put it pretty high because I'd say, I mean, given my misgivings about what it isn't, there's definitely that, but it's also, I've shown this film to people that don't even know some of this era of Pink Floyd, pre-Dark Side at least, and they never seen them live, and they see it and they go, oh, now I get the music. So as a document that can change someone's opinion, I'd give it like a 95. As a film of what it could have been, I'd give it like 50%. Like, man, it could have been such a cool, such a better film. More of their songs, and I but that's just one way of looking at it.
It's great. That's actually what I have written down here. I have 50 and 95. I had the same thing.
No.
Yeah, good job. We did it.
Bam, boom. That's the film. It's horribly flawed yet amazing.
Larry, this has been brilliant. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you.
So good to see you.
Yeah, man. Super fun. Thank you.
I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Revolutions Per Movie. We release new episodes every Thursday on your favorite podcast app and additional bonus episodes every Sunday on our Patreon. The show is a completely independent affair, so the best way to support the show is through our Patreon at patreon.com/revolutionspermovie, where you can get weekly bonus episodes and shows, exclusive limited edition flexi discs and records and CDs featuring guests that have appeared on the show, and other exclusive goods sent to you just for joining. You can follow us on social media at Revolutions Per Movie and also find out more information about our various guests in the episode show notes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye!